All right, so welcome back to the Marketing Mindset. So glad to have you here. We film these once a week and we try to cover topics that we think will be interesting to you from a marketing perspective. And this week's episode is all about being empathetic. To be empathetic as a marketer, it takes soul, and that's the topic of this conversation. But I want to recap some of the marketing mindsets we've done in the last couple of weeks. We actually started by talking about a bunch of different marketing tools. We offered the perfect marketing brief, and actually you can find that perfect marketing brief if you go to AgencySparks.com/blog archives. You can see all of these there. The third one was about measurement. The fourth one was about the agency and client relationship. Creative and inspiration was the fifth. Building great teams, and then empathy and marketing is the topic for today. Also, you can see past episodes of the Marketing Mindset by going to youtube.com/AgencySparks, and we post them there each week. So if there's a topic you wanted to catch from the past, you can go to YouTube and find it there. And also really open to your suggestions about future topics that you'd like for us to cover. We want to be helpful and useful for you. So we'll jump into the empathy topic, and we'll start by what is empathy? Empathy is really sharing the understanding or perspective of another. And this is very different from sympathy. There's a very well-known psychologist named Doctor Brené Brown who says that empathy drives connection and sympathy drives disconnection. There's actually a fantastic video on our blog post this week that has a cartoon that's been animated where she kind of talks about the difference between sympathy and empathy. So I definitely encourage you to go watch that video. She also states that empathy shows vulnerability, which actually shows courage. It takes courage to be vulnerable. So as a leader, I think we all strive to be more empathetic. And also from a marketing perspective, empathy is super important, and we'll talk a little bit more about why. So in the business world, the thought of showing emotions or vulnerability is often deemed kind of a weakness. And really, what we're talking about here is the kind of empathy where you're just putting yourself into the customer's shoes. That's a great way to kind of really understand your target audience and think of them as human beings and not just an audience. And so there's some questions that one can ask to put yourself in the shoes of your customer. What are the things that they're struggling with? How are they feeling? How can my brand help alleviate some of these struggles? And then as we reach out to marketers, how can we understand their sentiments and show them that we care and understand them? So those are some questions we can ask, and it's just a matter of understanding and doing something for the customer instead of to the customer. People don't like things done to them, but they're certainly willing to have somebody do something for them. So consumers see through tricks, and they can often see motives, and so it's our job to genuinely understand how the product or brand can fit into the consumer's life and make an impact on their life. And that brings us to a concept that we introduced during our blog called S.O.U.L, and it's S.O.U.L. And these tips will help inspire a more consumer-centric mindset. So I'm going to jump into S.O.U.L. So the S in S.O.U.L stands for separate self from work. The O is observe, the U is understand, and the L is leave an impact. And so we're going to break those down a little bit further. I'm going to talk about the S.O.U.L. Thinking like a marketer and thinking like a consumer are different. And so as a marketer, we need to step into their shoes. And that's part of the separating self from work concept. There's not really a marketing mindset, even though that's the name of our video sessions. It's more about... It's less about thinking about the numbers and thinking about what you would want to see and how you would want to feel if you were in the target audience that you're trying to reach. So separating yourself from your work. The other thing is remember that we're often trying to be a focus group of one, and that's not always the best measure of what a successful program could look like. The O, observe. Marketers must know what consumers need in order to cater to them. And so how do you observe them? We observe their interactions on a day-to-day basis in the real world. We see how they respond and react and behave in their day-to-day lives. And then we can also watch them online from a social media standpoint and using tracking tools and measurement tools. And it can sound kind of creepy, but it's just paying attention to what they're doing and watching them and picking up on the human behavior and tendencies that can impact what we might do from a marketing perspective. We talked here at AgencySparks about a tool that we love to use called Lucky Orange that helps us watch the user online. And our goal is not to ever be creepy. Our goal is to really just see what they're doing and understand the people that are visiting our site so that we can better serve them. So part of what we're trying to do when we observe is help narrow down the target market and the audience that we're trying to reach. Once you know that people are interested in your service or your product, you can start to flesh out the influences and habits and the goals of that target market, and then you can better message to resonate with them and form a better emotional connection. So studies often show that positive emotion towards a brand has more influence even on consumer loyalty. So that's the observe piece. The U of the soul is understand, and that's listen to the customer, but don't just listen. Try to understand what they're saying. So it's not just what they're saying, it's also the whys of what they're saying. And knowing what they want to feel and think about how your brand can make a difference in their lives. So that's the understand piece, the U and the soul. And then the L is leave an impact. An emotional impact lasts a lot longer. It doesn't have to be a tearjerker. It doesn't have to be funny, although it could be. But it needs to provoke a likable feeling for the brand. The Advertising Research Foundation concluded that the emotion of likability is a measure of the most predictive of whether an advertisement will resonate and a brand will sell better. And also an MRI study said that consumers use emotions to evaluate brands over information provided. So, if you can evoke an emotion, that often has a better impact than just trying to provide information about a brand. And then the other thing is just understanding where the consumer is coming from helps you come up with something that's more emotional, that leaves more of an impact, getting back to this L thing. So anyway, we wrote a blog post actually about humanizing the brand. If you go to agencysparks.com/blog archives, you can find the post about humanizing a brand, and that might be useful for this. And so I'm going to leave you with 3 points from that blog post that are pretty relevant to this whole empathy from marketing and the whole soul concept. There are sort of 3 things you can do to humanize a brand. One is be yourself or your brand's self. And you want to develop your brand voice. We talk a lot about brand voice here at AgencySparks, and one of our tenets of our brand voice is we can be snarky, but we want to be helpful. At the end of the day, we want to be a resource for marketers to really help them. And so for us, being helpful is an important part of our voice. And then Wendy's does a really good job of this, in that they're very, very snarky in their social media presence, but they also do a good job of humanizing the brand and not going overboard with it. The second idea is practicing what you preach and sticking to your values and living them versus trying to not having a backbone. There's a local brand here called The Vortex that is a chain of burger restaurants. And they've done a really good job of, I think, practicing what they preach and sticking to their values. When they've run into some kind of PR issues, they've been able to overcome those issues by living what they preach, practicing what they preach. And then the third is it's easier to have a dialogue with one person than everyone all at once. And so acknowledging people, particularly on social media or in other digital mediums, interacting with one person, sometimes you can resolve an issue that other people might be having with your brand. So it's important to listen and then interact, and then make changes to your company based on what you've learned about them and what you're hearing from them. So anyway, going back to it, I want to just recap really quickly the idea of soul. Separate yourself from your work, observe the customer or client, understand where they're coming from and leave an impact. And if you want to hear more marketing mindsets, you can always go to youtube.com/AgencySparks. Also, we post them on our Facebook page and Twitter and other places as well. So anyway, again, appreciate your coming every week and listening to me. If you have any suggestions for future topics, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.